Good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yesterday, we spoke about what beginning looks like, what it is, and we did quite a bit of discussion on that. However, one of the major topics that we talked about that beginning and living in beginning or returning to beginning is predicated on is forgiveness, one of them anyway. And I want to see if there are questions about that. However, Kathy Neal has already stated that she has a question. So, Kathy, with a C, what is your question?
Okay, I was wanting to know, and I can't remember if you touched on this once before, there's 27 bones in the hand, and in the New Testament, 27 books. So what is the significance with that?
I don't see any significance in that. And the reason I say that is because the 27 books in the New Testament were chosen for a purpose, for the purpose of manipulation, as opposed to for the purpose of information. And to relate that to the hand, for me to relate it to the hand, rather, I have no understanding of that correlation at all.
Okay. And my other one was, it's not about the Bible, but it's what is it that you think is happening with, they saying these babies born during the pandemic, there's something strange about them. Like I saw one baby had a tooth, born with a tooth, and then the other ones, I saw one actually trying to talk, and you could understand what she was saying, and then another one I saw where more than one, it's like where they're actually trying to get up and walk at 3 months. So what you think is going on there?
Well, honestly, I think we're just noticing that because things like that have always happened with kids being born with teeth and talking very, very early. I have a cousin who is, I think child must be, 5 or 6 now? And she's been talking ever since I've been knowing her. So I think a lot of the things that's happening have always been happening. We are just paying attention to them because we slowed down enough to pay attention to the things around us. Now, if there may very well be an increase in it, but I have no knowledge of that at all. And if anyone else does, please inform us. Okay, you 2 for 2. You asked me something I don't know nothing about twice. Go ahead. What's the next one?
That's it.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Hey, Ralph.
Charlie.
You remember you had talked to us about, well, I want to lay it on out there. They had a study, and they had said the pregnancy in the United States don't went down.
Yeah.
So, and a while back you had said when the babies stop having baby boomers like it was back then, if they start slowing down, that's when you know the end is close.
Okay. So what? So you asking me is the end close? I do believe.
Well, yes, then.
Yeah, I do believe it is, but not the end of the world. I believe that the end of this tight society is close. Yes, I do believe that, and I believe that it's closer than we really know, or really see, rather. So, and it is ironic that there was a decrease in the births of babies when you think about it. There was during the pandemic the thought that there would be an increase since everyone was staying in place. However, it did just the opposite. So let's see how that really plays out in terms of the change that we see on the horizon. Okay. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, everyone, for those questions. Any more questions? No one else? If there aren't any other questions, is there anything, those of you who are facilitators in particular, teachers in particular, have you been shown anything? Okay. Did I hear someone trying to get on?
I don't know, but I got something else. Saturday, when you kept talking about the wind, I woke up over in the morning and I kept hearing a fresh wind is coming. A fresh wind is coming. I kept hearing it in my spirit, and that's all I kept hearing, a fresh wind is coming.
That's probably speaking to what we are about to experience in terms of resurgence of the presence and the reality of the spiritual the spiritual renewal that we have been ushering in and desiring for so long. There's no doubt in my mind that that's what we are not about to experience, but a lot of us are already experiencing it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. I'm finished.
So you're not, but okay. Anyone else?
Pastor Ron. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Whoever.
No, Ron, you go ahead.
Go ahead, Catherine. I'm good.
I just had a quick observation that I wanted to make based on what we talked about yesterday when you kept saying our children. And that's why I asked the question, are you speaking of youth or are you speaking of the Caucasian as our children? Because all the times that we've said that they are us and we are them, I still didn't take ownership for any of their actions until you started saying they were our children. And what made that resonate with me, I didn't go back to work this year. I retired, and they replaced me with a counselor that was in the department that the children already knew. When she came to have lunch with me last week, she made the comment to me, you know, this whole year I could not stand your children. And she was like, they were horrible. I only liked 2 of them. I didn't like any of them. And I was like surprised to hear her say that because I loved my children. And she said, I just didn't like them. And one of them even told me, you know, I was Miss Smith's favorite. And she said, and I let her know, but you're not mine, and I don't like the way you're acting. And we talked about that. It did not resonate with me until last night after you had said the thing about our children on yesterday. If it's the children, I don't take any ownership over it, but when it is my child that's misbehaving or when it's my child behaving badly, then I feel the need to do something. And I was telling Linda, I said the reason she had such a hard time is that she never made them her children. She would even send me a text message or two during the year saying, you better come and get your kids. Look at how your kids are acting. And that resonated with me because be it forgiveness, loving kindness, or anything that we expect to bring about a change with, we have to take ownership of it. So even when we talk about forgiveness and forgiving ourselves and loving ourselves and understanding that, you know, when I learn to forgive myself, I can do other things, that I can be more forgiving and tolerant of others and better able to forgive them. All of that hit home with me yesterday when you used the term our children. And so even as I listened to what Sheldon was saying about unforgiveness being a blockage that dams us up, it made me realize that whether I am operating from a place of forgiveness or unforgiveness, either way, I'm going to create something. If I'm operating from a place of unforgiveness, I'm dammed up. I am attached to whatever it is now in a sense that I cannot let go of whatever it is that's causing me to be in a state of unforgiveness. And I'm creating from that low dense energy that's going to keep me from being no thing. But when I recognize that I am you, you are me, we're all one, and I'm able to let go and look at you with compassion, even when you have committed the most heinous act, if I can still look at you from a place of loving kindness and compassion, I will, through forgiveness and loving kindness, create from a place of higher awareness that being one with Elohim. All of that came to me as a result of you saying yesterday, our children. And I just wanted to make that observation. So thank you for that.
You're welcome, ma'am. Any comments or questions about what Kathy just related to us? Because I'm going to.
I'm sorry.
Okay, Ryan, I want to address forgiveness eventually anyway, but go ahead.
Well, my question kind of connects with that because I want to talk about taking ownership. I was looking at it from a different perspective, though. I was looking at it from the perspective of what Audrey said about the African, forgiving himself for his obligation that he laid aside. And that kind of stuck with me, and I've been kind of giving that a lot of thought. And Kathy just mentioned it, taking ownership of it. And I just from that perspective, a lot of that had to do with survival, doing whatever you had to do to survive. But we also reached a point where that was, trying to assimilate and become who your captors were also played a major role in it. So I like that she brought that up, and I didn't know if you want to talk more about it, or is there anything that needs to be done or addressed in that way? But that's just something I saw from yesterday that kind of stuck with me. Just to comment on something Kathy said, though, the first thing I thought about was hireling and the shepherd. I mean, she's just there. She hasn't taken ownership of the job either. I mean, how can you be a counselor and not care about kids? That's ridiculous. But I guess that says a lot about society. We ignore each other. We see people, but we ignore each other. Nothing is personal with us. We don't allow those walls to be torn down, and that's the shame of it all. How can you do kids that way?
But but also, how can you be a representative of democracy, and those who represent you don't care about their constituency? So it's the same principle, but just in a different place,
Yeah.
So in this, what you see is the creation of a society that is nothing what it purports to be. My observation of all of this harkens back to years ago, and what I mean by that is we have talked about for many years that America will only become a democracy when the enslaved, the ones who were enslaved, makes it a democracy, and that is more evident today than ever before. What's happening is the injustices that have been perpetrated all of these years are now being noticed by more and more people, and they have an increasingly distaste for what they're seeing. And as a result of that, there's more and more pressure being put on those who are supposedly are representatives of the population to do their jobs and making sure that the population is taken care of. However, as we all know, that is not being done. Now, what we are seeing now is more and more in your face. We do what we want to do when we want to do it, and we have no regard for those who we are supposed to be representing. That happens because it is always the darkness before the dawn, meaning that if these things were not being done, for example, the bill in Texas with the voter suppression and all the rest of them, the 300 plus around the country, all these things has to be done in order for people to see the true nature of this pseudo-democracy so that it can become a true representative democracy. Without these blatant in-your-face deals and antics, this would never happen. And I say all of that because the idea of what we will see as a representative democracy is a manifestation of the balance and harmony, the peace that we have not only longed for, but that we are beginning to see take shape. Questions or comments about that? Maybe I should ask, Rod, does that make sense to you in light of what you just said?
It does. Yeah, it does.
Any questions or comments about that?
I don't know if it's about that, Real, but what you're saying, things got to happen to almost like push us in the corner for us to get up and do what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, it pushed us in the corner, yes. But the difference is this, Charles. We who are seekers of truth, we who are light bearers, are shining the light on everything that needs to be changed. And it is we who are pushing everyone in the corner and forcing them to see the injustices, the inequalities, all of the things that are burdens to humanity. And as a result of that, we are in the process of forcing change. Yes. Now, it is not the event that's pushing people in the corner. It is the desires for change that's creating the light that shows the injustices. And these injustices is what's forcing the change, okay?
Okay.
Are any questions or comments about that? I hope that came out right. Any other questions or comments? Observations? We have. Go ahead.
It was only quickly with what Kathy mentioned in terms of the kids, and I said it before, and even with kids and all of us in general, we have the ability to sense different things and pick up different things from people. And typically, kids, especially the ones that seem like it may be very difficult. I don't want to say to get them to go along with the program, but kids that come off as being strong-willed. The thing is those kids usually have a much better detection of detecting other people's interests as well. And those kids usually don't care what you know until they know you care. And once they know you care, then they open up and will more so align themselves with your guidance, et cetera, accordingly. But it's kind of like I'm not about to just do something because you're telling me to do it, and I'm not just automatically going to recognize your authority. And also, in a way, as I'm talking and I'm thinking about it, it actually, in a way, serves them better also in terms of almost like a sixth sense or intuition and going along with people who they know or feel has their best interests at heart.
And usually, those are the people who they respect, regardless of how quote unquote bad a kid may be labeled as. That kid can be reached if that kid knows someone cares. And the reason that they are called Kathy's kids is because they knew she cared. And regardless of how they were labeled and what they went through, that respect for her was never questioned. It was always there. Which, and by virtue of that teacher saying the counselor saying what she did, what she was saying in essence is that she has absolutely no respect of the kids who she's supposed to be counseling. And she will not get it until her attitude towards them change.
Yeah, on a deeper level, or going even further, I'm sure that Kathy is probably the only one that could get them to do certain things, or probably the only one that they will listen to. But thinking about it further, when Kathy is actually showing that she cares, I don't even want to say show. I just want to say because Kathy cares, and they automatically know that Kathy cares and can pick up on that. What begins to happen is that there's a connection that is made there. They see themselves aligned with Kathy, and a lot of times kids who may come off as being disruptive a lot of times see themselves as me against the world, and everyone is against them as well. So everyone is more so an enemy, and it's like, you're not necessarily on my team. But and what I'm getting into here is I'm talking more so the spiritual aspect of it. I'm talking about more the oneness, and this idea of caring is a small a small aspect of that oneness, so to speak. I'm finished.
So if we take that right and we relate that to what Kathy started off with, and that would be realizing or having the epiphany of what it really means when we talk about Caucasians being our children. If we take that and relate it to, take what you just said and relate it to that, then what you are saying is the people with the attitude of Mitch McConnell attitude, those attitudes can be altered when they know you care. Is that what you're saying?
I wasn't saying that, but by what follows is no, that is absolutely true. That is definitely the case as well. Because I mean, right now, the same people that we were talking about when we initially first started, when we're talking about our children, we talk about those of the Mitch McConnells, et cetera, they clearly have an attitude or just an approach in general where it's myself against everyone else, or myself and my small group against all of these other groups, so to speak. And I think somebody mentioned earlier about survival of the fittest. And that's what they look at. The prism of the world, or the way that they see the world, is just that: me against everyone, or me against everything else. So yes.
So we have to what you're saying then in essence is, and Kathy, I would appreciate if you would address this as well. What you're saying in essence then is those people who entered that building on January the 6th is not not about them individually. It's about a collective attitude, or it's about the energy that they used to justify their being there. If because not if or when, but because we truly care about our children, we truly care about their future and about the direction that they're traveling in, that in itself is not symbolic, is another way of saying that love truly does become the covering for a multitude of entanglements. Does that make sense?
It
It
does.
does.
So
And you said it, Pastor, there's not a lot to add, because basically what we are learning is that what I'm learning is I care about the fact that I recognize now the deception. We know that we've been deceived and our eyes are open to that deception. They are still unaware of the fact that they have been deceived, and every fear that could plague them, every fear that could torment them in their minds of what would happen if they lose, quote unquote, control or power, is what has been stroked, and pretty much that has what has been ignited on the inside of them, that fear of, if you don't do something, you will lose your identity, you will lose everything, not even recognizing that they don't even have their identity yet, because their identity is not in what I can take with my weapon. They don't even understand the identity is found in being one with a womb. They don't know that. And I am better able to be more forgiving and more compassionate when I look at my children as my children have been deceived. And if I am the person with truth, and I am, then it is my role as quote unquote parents to give my children what they need to awaken them to this deception, to give them the ability to change. And if I look at it that way and embrace them as mine, as a part of them, like I said, as opposed to them doing something that is separate and not a part of me, it just made a lot of sense to me. While I'm speaking, I'm going to add one other piece to this that I need a little clarity on. I know we talked a lot about forgiveness on yesterday and forgiving ourselves, but when you don't know, I guess the question that came to my mind as I thought about the lesson later in the day, once again, even when we didn't know that we were being deceived, and we tried to assimilate into a culture that we were not supposed to ever fit into, but we were supposed to be an example of what it means to be the spiritual man. But we threw all of that away to fit into a culture that we thought would give us acceptance. When you have not even realized that is what you're doing, how do you get to a place of understanding the need for forgiving yourself for having done what you've done when you don't realize what you've done?
I honestly, I think that is one of those things that does not have its origin with you. And let me explain what I'm saying. We did not get to a place of understanding what we have done by perpetuating this lie of assimilation until we started looking outwardly at the things that were being done to destroy us or to keep us enslaved or to keep us in a subservient position. And then once we were seeing those things, then we were shown by the light of all lights that we had deceived ourselves by buying into that as opposed to questioning it. So I do believe that our children are self-deceived. What I mean by that is they have deceived themselves into believing that we as African are actually inferior when they don't really believe that, but they had to convince themselves of that in order to justify using us for economic gain. The self-deception also is very, very prevalent in the religious beliefs. Those religious beliefs being that Jesus looked like them, and that Jesus justifies their going into that building, and Jesus justifies them in their desires to enslave humans. So once we are able to continuously put truth about what is happening in the macro, and they begin to see the injustices, then they will begin to see the deception that they have convinced themselves that is true. In other words, they will begin to see their self-deception after they are able to see the inequities that they are condoning by virtue of not saying anything, or by virtue of saying that an election was stolen, where they know full well that it wasn't. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Any questions or comments about this? And I will speak to forgiveness in a second. We have, as I said, have spoken numerous times about the concept of forgiveness. However, if we understand that the whole idea of beginning speaks to the conceptual understanding of what good and evil is, what ripe and unripeness is, and how to bring ripeness to that which is unripe, which means that we take full responsibility for our actions. And when you take full responsibility for your actions, the first thing that you begin to ripen or to bring some sense of civility and harmony to is the way you think and the way you respond to those around you, even those who present themselves as adversaries to you. And this is what fosters spiritual awareness, spiritual maturity. And when that happens, we begin to see that we don't only forgive, we are forgiveness itself, meaning that we don't have to ponder whether or not we are going to forgive an act or forgive a person or forgive anything for that matter. We automatically do it because that's who we are. It's no different than parenting. You don't have to give birth to a child to be a parent. Parenting is about nurturing, providing direction in a positive way. Parenting skills are not based upon biology in terms of giving birth or being the seed for someone to give birth. And just like those skills are not predicated on that, the parenting skills are there. They are innate, and so is forgiveness. When we are aware of who we are, we begin to see that forgiveness comes with the ease of just as easy as taking half a milk. As one of the sages said, that's how easy it is for us to forgive. We don't have to go through a stage of anger and disassociation in order to forgive. We realize immediately that what we see is in a state of disarray, so it needs to be forgiven so it can be restored to what it was supposed to be from the beginning. And the power of forgiveness itself speaks to the power of creativity, and the power of creativity speaks to the power to transform those things that are in disarray, those substances that have no benefit to humanity, to transform them into a substance that benefits all of humanity, as well as the one who are brought into a state of disarray. As a matter of truth, one of the most damaging things that we can ever harbor is unforgiveness. unforgiveness, as I think Sheldon used a example yesterday of a blood clot. It stops everything from moving in the body that provides life to it, and if it's not dealt with quickly enough, it will result in death. So unforgiveness results in spiritual death, and it doesn't mean that the absence of the Spirit. It means that spiritual death means that a total unawareness as to who you are. Unforgiveness does not lend itself to love and kindness, neither does it lend itself to mercy. It is impossible. It is more than improbable. It is impossible to be love and kindness in the absence of forgiveness. There is no way that there can be unicity between love and kindness and unforgiveness. So the power of unforgiveness is more destructive to the one who is harboring it than it is to the one who you refuse to forgive. Any questions or comments about that? Or does that make sense to you guys?
It makes sense.
So I guess what I'm saying in essence is this: when we truly embrace that we are the beginning of everything that is, when we truly embrace that, then we have automatically embraced forgiveness. Now this is, to me anyway, one of the greater tests for forgiveness and where you are in terms of embracing it is when we look at those things that are detestable, those things that are reprehensible. When we look at the guy who stomped the lady to death, when we look at the guy who was raped with the broomstick, when we look at the ones who did these things, are you able to forgive them without hesitation, without animosity, without caveats, just simply forgiveness? And that's something that you have to ask yourself. That is not something that I can magically impart to you. That is something that you have to embrace for yourself. When you are able to forgive those types of things in an instant, then you are truly living what you are created to be, and that is the essence of beginning, which is also the essence of Elohim, because out of Elohim came everything that exists, and our being Elohim, we are in a position to bring about the creativity of forgiveness. And what does forgiveness create? What does love and kindness create? What does mercy create? What is brought into this space when this type of creativity is exercised? What is it? When this creativity is embraced, what is the result of that? The result of that is the tree of life in the realm of the earth, in this earth consciousness. The tree of life takes. What is the tree of life? The tree of life is a conceptual understanding of what it means to be loving kindness, what it means to be the essence of forgiveness and mercy. It is a conceptual understanding of the pros and cons of what life is, meaning that you embrace those who are struggling with this idea of forgiveness, those who are struggling with who they are, people who go into who went into a building on January 6th are struggling with identity, and this the tree of life is that essence or that entity or that energy that embraces them for the purpose of transforming them into a positive entity, or transforming that energy into energy that exists for the benefit of the existence of humanity itself. And when we are at this place of creativity, it is then that we begin to see the results of infusing in earth consciousness the essence of what the tree of life is, what Eden is, and freeing it from the serpent, which is self-deception. Any questions or comments about that? Or is that clear? I need to hear from you.
It's clear.
I understand.
Okay. And I'm not asking you to regurgitate what I'm saying, but I am asking. I do want to know whether or not it resonates with you, and whether or not it's clear enough for you to embrace. Because quite frankly, most of what we talk about, if we were to repeat it, it wouldn't come out the same way anyway. The key to it is understanding that all words are energy, and the energy of the words, the light of the words that we speak, are for the express purpose of illuminating the darkness and bringing order to that which is in disarray, and to bring stability to that which is unstable, and to bring a sense of ripeness to that which is unripened, and that which is ripened becomes the root, a seed rather, for the tree of life, and we are in this earth realm to transform the consciousness of this earth realm into the consciousness of enlightenment. And this is what we are speaking of when we talk about the new earth and the new heaven. The idea of having a fresh direction of spirituality, a fresh understanding of spirituality, in embracing of the spiritual nature of our essence without equivocation, and doing it without regard to how we or it will be accepted by others. Doing it because it is the righteous thing to do, and it is the only way that we can be certain of the preservation of life in this earth. If without spiritual consciousness, the life in this earth is always threatened. With spiritual consciousness, the life in this earth is in a state of continuous preservation. Questions or comments about that?
The question on that right there is what you're saying. Life is almost like in a circle. That's mostly what you're saying.
Life is cyclical. Yeah, life is a circle. It's going to, and until we correct what is wrong, the cycle will continue. But what happens is, as we travel around the circle and change it as we move through it, eventually we get to the place where we started and we were at beginning, and everything becomes fresh again. And everything becomes what it was supposed to be from the beginning. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Now, all of this, not all of it, but a lot of this started with understanding the Nicodemus returning to beginning at the instruction of Jesus, and looking at the idea that that Moses lived at that place of beginning, and it dawned on me that if Moses lived in the place of beginning, then we needed to understand Eden. Why? Because the Scripture speaks of Eden being the place, the Garden East of Eden, rather, being the place where the entity that was created by Yahweh and Elohim, that it was in this garden that it was placed. And if we understand what this means, then we will be able to understand Moses' experience when as he lived at the place of in the space rather of beginning. What was this entity called Adam placed in? It was more of it being the pleasure that it was given when it was placed in this particular space was the pleasure of being able to be loving kindness and forgiveness and mercy, all of the attributes of Elohim, to be that in the midst of a space where there existed contradictions to it, contradictions to loving kindness, contradictions to forgiveness, contradictions to mercy. Being able to live in this space and work towards bringing the contradictions in this space to a place of balance where they begin to not only become but begin to desire to be what they are experiencing, meaning loving kindness and forgiveness, etc. This is how we bring those who are deceived, who are self-deceived, to this space of Eden, to this space of conceptual understanding of what life is about, to this space of spiritual maturity. Are you able to see that? Are those the things that I'm talking about?
Yes.
Seeing this, then that means that what we also must embrace or accept by seeing this is that this same loving kindness, this same forgiveness, these same attributes of Elohim exist both in male and female, feminine and masculine energies, and they cannot function separate from each other. The contradictions are brought to bear when there are efforts put forth for these attributes to function separate from feminine and masculine energy. An example of that is really seen in how the church functions. Regardless of the religion that you look at, what you will see is that there are distinctive divisions between males and females, which is a manifestation of the belief that there are divisions between the spiritual feminine energy and spiritual masculine energy. All religions have built themselves on the foundation of believing that women are inferior to men, which means that they view, whether they say it or not, they view feminine energy as being inferior to masculine energy. And with that belief, we have created a contradiction to the truth of our existence, because the true nature of our existence is the inextricably unicity between masculine and feminine energy. And when we make an effort to separate that, and we convince ourselves that they are separate, that in itself results in a type of confusion that now has to has to create a continuous contradiction to everything that looks like the unicity of masculine and feminine. Therefore, we end up creating separate duties and responsibilities in churches for males and females. A woman can't teach a man. Males are in charge of everything, and women follow suit. We began to partition buildings where women sit in one section and men sit in another section. We began to arrange marriages where women are forced to be in marriages and relationships with men much older than them or men that are not of their choice, of their choosing. Then we see where there is employment that make divisions and distinctions between male and females, where males are paid more than females because the man is the one who is the breadwinner and the woman cannot be that. All of these types of separations, we see that even at the end of slavery in this nation, African men could vote, but African women could not. And when that was supposedly had been rectified in the 20s with Susan B. Anthony, that was only for Caucasian women. It did not include the African woman. So all of these separations that we see, and even to the contradiction that goes even to the place where the children have had to create a contradiction, believing that or convincing themselves that the African with the one with the ingenuity and the one with the creative juices that brought into fruition a world for the benefit of humanity is inferior to that entity that is filled with greed and hatred. So all of these contradictions start when we begin when we fail to see the continuity or to embrace the continuity between masculine and feminine energy. Any questions or comments about that? Any further observations involving this, or anything for that matter? Well, if there are no observations, there are no questions, there are no comments, then I'm done. I'm that one who don't just talk because it's time. I believe that when you exhaust what you see, then that's the end, unless there are questions or comments.
I guess I do have an observation, and it's more of a thought that's not complete. Based on our discussion on yesterday and hearing what you're saying now, I this morning I was looking because my thought is, where did this happen? Where did this disconnect happen? How does masculine energy totally disregard females? Where does that start? Did it happen in the garden? Is the answer there? Is the answer is putting it back together? Goes back to the garden. I was looking this morning, and the story we were talking about, the man killing a woman in front of her mom. I wanted to read that. And I Googled it this morning, and I was overwhelmingly shocked, and I guess overwhelmed is a good word. There are pages upon pages out there of such things happening. And this it's no coincidence we're talking about it, of course. And I think we're talking about it because there has to be a solution that maybe only this group can find because we desire it. But it does. It seems to be a little overwhelming at times, and my thought on it is maybe this has something to do with self-hatred. Is man hating himself, or he hates the female because of his out of ignorance based on what happened with Adam and Eve, not being able to see that or understand it, or I don't know. I don't know, but I think there's an origin there that maybe we're close to, or something that may shed a little more light on it.
May I offer something?
Yeah,
Um,
I think not gonna send me out there looking for it, are you?
say again.
Never mind. Go ahead.
I want to offer something. I think I believe it started because if we are to be Elohim, right? Then there is something that we have to embrace. We embrace the reality that in order for Elohim to create, the earth had become void and without form, right?
Okay.
And darkness covered the deep, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So suppose for a moment that when that entity was informed or was made aware of its essence in terms of being the essence of pleasure for mankind, right? The delight of mankind based upon understanding the life itself and understanding the concepts of what creation is about and what balance and harmony is about. In order for this entity to become as its creator, meaning Elohim, it had to do the same thing. So what happened in this experience was this entity brought into existence a world that was without form and void, meaning that a world of chaos. And it did that when it made the decision to become a separate entity from a room, and saying that because I am Esau and Ish, because I am male and female, I can create without a broom. I can be separate and different from a broom. That was already in the entity when it was brought into existence. And in doing so, the earth consciously became void and without form, and darkness covered the deep. Does that not describe where we are now?
It does.
So, go ahead, but I want to carry it a step further. Go ahead.
I guess I'm just trying to understand everything you said, because I've always understood that to be the earth was created that way. In other words, there was a place that had all answers and all enlightenment, and there was a place to fill that, to bring that light into. So it could the shape of it was to be determined by the entity that was supposed to be the likeness of his creator. Does that make sense? So it was created from the beginning to be shapeless and void. So what shape are you going to make it? What are you going to fill it with? It's kind of how I see that. And here's everything that you need to do that with. And then by not staying connected, by saying I can do this on my own, he being mankind, totally missed the fact that here is this enlightenment that's at your disposal in order for you to be Elohim. You don't have to disconnect to do it. In fact, it's virtually impossible
Totally
for you
impossible.
to do this. Yeah, totally impossible for you to do this on your own. So we are just getting back to the place where we recognize the fact that I created heaven and earth. That's not physical things. This is the spirit that is in you. You are filled with enlightenment, but you cannot enter it based on this ignorance that you can do this without being the spiritual being you are. So it's there, but it's not there because you do not have access to it. And what we have to do is, out of that mental part of you, chosen to fill the earth with the chaos.
The light is there. The spiritual world is there. Suppose for a moment that well, let me say this: the earth has never been a place of balance. There has always been chaos in the earth. So suppose for a moment that the earth was created for the express purpose of bringing this entity to the place where it is exactly like its creator, Elohim. Now, in order for that to happen, there had to be something to work with. There had to be some clay in order to build the pot, right?
Okay.
And the clay that's there was given, was placed there. When we talk about the Garden of Eden, this is not a place. This is a personality trait. This is an aspect of that spiritual being, okay? You understand? Eden is the spiritual being. Tree of life,
right?
Spiritual being. The being it is pleasant in its created state. In its created state, the being is conscious of life and understands loving kindness in its created state. Yet, when it deviates from its created state, then those contradictions are there. So those contradictions were there from the beginning, and that is the reason that when this entity was given a body, when flesh was put on it, what happened? It ended up with two things. It has a mind and it has a soul, neither one of which you can see. The mind is the confused state of humanity. The soul is the place of order. The mind consists of the tree of knowledge of good and evil in its confused state. The soul is the tree of life itself. And the flaming sword is the desire, is the fire of desire that entity that the human has for it to understand its spiritual essence. It's the fire that caused us to have a desire to bring all of these things out in the open, the misogyny, the racism, expose it all. This is the fire. This is the sword that brought about the purification, so that we could enter this, so we could actually function from our soul experiences as opposed to our intellectual mind experiences. And in doing so, we're in the process now of bringing into fruition the new earth, which is reflective of that which is above, meaning that the spiritual essence of truth, the spiritual essence of enlightenment is what we are bringing into this earth consciousness. The consciousness of the earth has been driven by intellect and not by the soul. And because it has been intellectually driven, it has brought into existence religion that has a touch of spirituality, but has no understanding of what spirituality really is. It is so where we are now is when we talk about living from the depths of our soul, we are talking about living from the new heaven. And when we are talking about bringing balance to the earth, we are talking about a new earth. We're talking about a new earth consciousness. And that new earth consciousness is reflective of the consciousness of what is above. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
So what I am saying is we are still right outside of the garden, meaning that we are in this place of at the place of confusion. When I say we, I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about humanity, right? We are at this place of confusion, and now that we recognize it, we're like, oh my God, I didn't know it was this bad, meaning that I see more of it than I've ever seen before in my life. Why do you see it? Because you have been looking for it. Why have you been looking for it? Because your soul is crying out and saying to you, if you don't see it, you don't know what to do with it. You don't know how to change it. You cannot do this intellectually. You have tried it intellectually. You've tried it legislatively. You've tried it religiously. You can't do it. Why? Because all that goes right back to your mind and not your soul. So your soul, once the soul brings balance, brings harmony into the consciousness of this earth, it is at that point that the mind and the soul become one entity, and you begin to live as the spiritual being that you were created to be. And that is what Jesus was very, very expressive of. If we look very closely at his life, he did not deal with the intellect. He dealt from his soul, but he recognized that the intellect was the damage that was brought to this earth. And I'm not saying that intellect is poison, but what I am saying, when intellect is becomes superior to spiritual essence and spiritual reality, that's when it becomes poisonous. That's when when everything about it becomes vitriolic, and we end up seeing the things that we see, the brutality that we are seeing towards men, the idea that men or women, or that women are inferior and that people of color are less than human. Those kinds of things are the vitriol that comes from the mind, not the soul. And if I'm confusing you, please raise the question. If you don't understand it, raise the question. If you see something different or see something more, please make the comment. Give me your observations.
I'm just digesting it right now. But I would like to discuss this further.
This is Ramel. I agree with Ron. I do have a question, though. You had spoke earlier that we need to forgive ourselves. I guess my question is, if we don't know how to forgive ourselves, how can we forgive others? Does that make sense?
Well, it does make sense. When we have forgiven others, we have done it through lip service. However, when we do it from the depth of our soul, whenever anything rises in us that's going to cause us to feel a certain way towards that individual or that act,
right,
then we actually push it away from us. No, that's not who I am. I'm not going there. I have dealt with this, and we deal with that person as though it never happened.
Okay, we have to.
Go ahead.
We have to let our spirituality override our physical minds that tell us, I dislike this person. I don't or I don't want to forgive them.
We have to our soul, our spiritual essence must override our social, environmental conditioning and our religious antics or our religious principles.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
It does. We've said this before that we don't have time to waste with mulling a thought over. And so when you talked about forgiving, like the comment about the man who stomped the lady in front of her mom, first my mind couldn't even wrap around how he could conceive of doing that. Then I thought, boy, forgiveness would be really tough. And then I had to remind myself, you don't have time to be thinking about it being tough. You have to forgive that action. You have to forgive that person because it's so instantaneous.
Yes, forgiveness. That's what I mean when I say living at that place of beginning, right? When we live, being in this world but not of this world, that we are living at the place of beginning. We are living in this space. What does that mean? How do you live? How are you living the life of a parent? How do you live the life of a sister, a cousin? If you know how to live a life of a parent, then live the life of the beginning. How do you do that? By being loving kindness, by being forgiveness, by being mercy, by being all of the things that are necessary to bring about harmony, by doing all the things that are necessary to be the covering for entanglement, regardless of how reprehensible they are. Questions, comments?
I think, and that we talked about this and you said this, but the other side of love is forgiveness. I mean, they go hand in hand. The comment about self-forgiveness to me was the reward in that to me was the awareness of it. There's something about just that being an aha moment, like, wow, that's powerful. And I think it opens doors, and I'm talking spiritually, mentally. It opens doors and moves things out of the way. And that's what I saw when that was said. And I had a buddy of mine called me, and we were talking about something, and he talked about something that someone close to him did, his significant other, and how he felt about it. And I reminded him, although it's been many years ago, he was in a similar situation. He did something very similar, and how she handled it. And he had to stop and think about that. And the thing is, what I was thinking when we were talking about it is, sometimes it's a lot easier to forgive ourselves than it is other people. And in that regard, it kind of was an awakening for him, just like when that was said yesterday, it was an awakening for me. And so I think the self-forgiveness to me is the powerful thing that kind of helps us to see love and appreciate love and the power of it. Because if you can do that, and see it and see for what it is and the door that it opens and how that frees you, I think that's just opens up other avenues. I don't know where else to go with that, but I just think that's very very powerful thing, and that's why I was just glad we talked about it a little bit more. I think me forgiving me kind of helps me forgive others. That's what I'm saying, and maybe you guys see that a little differently.
Anyone want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think both of them on the same kind of like they're the same thing, but depending on an approach by individuals. The self-forgiveness part is more so starting off from the point of seeing yourself or seeing ourselves worthy. Because when we're not forgiving ourselves, in essence, what we're doing is seeing ourselves in some way as being less than or inadequate, or you don't even have to be necessarily thinking about it consciously, but feeling, walking around and having a feeling of essentially not being whole. The idea and what I was thinking in terms of as we keep on mentioning forgiveness, to just put out there for anyone not to think of just forgiveness as an action or just see it as an idea of something that I'm supposed to do. But what forgiveness is, in terms of forgiveness, is the title of something that is actually taking place. And what is actually taking place, you don't forgive someone just by paying the lip service and saying that I forgive this person. Forgiving someone is to then see that person who at a moments ago or whenever previously you did not see as being completely whole, you did not see as being part of yourself. You now see that person as a whole individual. You see that person as being worthy. It does not mean that you you agree with whatever the transgression is that they may have done. It doesn't mean that you believe that in the future they will not do that transgress in the same exact way. What it means is that you do not, it doesn't mean that you have to ever speak with them. I'm not saying to speak with them or not. My point is the forgiveness is completely separate from any action that can take place, or it's not dependent upon any action that may take place in the future. Forgiveness is within your heart, seeing that person as whole, seeing that person is worthy, seeing that person or feeling and knowing that that person is connected to you. It's not that I feel like I know a lot of times this idea or forgiveness and the idea how we're typically traditionally taught just is something that you're supposed to do. Forgiveness becomes more so of a task, is paid lip service, and is very rarely actually explained the process of what is actually taking place. So I say all this to say for us as individuals to be able to concentrate on forgiveness and what it looks like and what that actually is, both individually, collectively, and as that relates to others, whether or not we come into contact with them or not.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Thank you, Sheldon and Ron. That helped a lot.
Great. Okay.
Hey, Rep.
Mhm.
When you when you ask forgiveness for yourself, don't it freeze your soul too?
Yeah. Yeah. It restores you as well.
Right.
Yeah. Forgiveness is a process of spiritual restoration.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I have been thinking about it in terms of yes, what forgiveness does to the body, both physically and from a spiritual standpoint. it is as Pastor Richard just said. Now, it is a cleansing to return your return your soul and body to its purest form, where all of them, both of those things basically operate efficiently and as they should. The things that I was thinking about earlier, as we were talking about, in a sense, when someone is harboring hate or unforgiveness, forgiveness, in a sense, when we talked about cleansing the body of blood clot, it's also a detox, and essentially getting the toxins out of the body. It's just becoming pure. Like I said, it's the reason why you feel lighter. It is the reason why interactions are easier and effortless. You're not holding on to a burden, so to speak. And this also goes to what Pastor Richard said earlier when he mentioned that the person who is being unforgiving goes through way more than the person that they are failing to forgive, because this unforgiveness affects us. It affects us directly. I'm finished.
Okay. Anyone else? I think we've talked about a lot, and I want to see if it's making sense to you guys. I'm sure it is. So what I would ask you to do is get this uploaded as quickly as possible, and then let's see if you have any questions. Then we will revisit this again, among other things, of course, on Saturday. Are we good with
Pastor,
that?
before we end, may I add one more thought?
Sure.
Because I'm processing everything that's been said, and so much has been said tonight. And I'm just thinking, I thought about what Ron said about learning to forgive yourself makes it easier to forgive others. And I listened to the dialogue that followed that, and I agree with that. And I think the thing that helps me to forgive myself for whatever it is that I feel that I need to forgive myself for, whatever acts I may have committed, is recognizing that at the time that I did those things, or whatever it is that I'm harboring the unforgiveness up toward myself for, was it was during a period of time where I didn't have an awareness of who I am. And now that I'm learning who I am, just like as I look at someone else who does not know who he is spiritually, it makes it easier for me to let go and forgive myself. Then when I look at someone else, like I'm going to use the man that killed the girl in front of her invalid, bedridden mother who could only lie there and scream as she's begging him to not do that. She can't intervene at all, and not knowing what he's going to do to her once he finishes with the daughter. As I put all of those pieces together in my mind, I asked myself, what did I feel when I heard that? And though I felt a deep sadness and hurt for the victim, I also looked at him as a victim, because he is a victim of not knowing who he is. And I had to ask myself, how hurt does he have to be? Because I heard Vanell say, like, wow, what was going on with him? How damaged has life made him to the point where he has lost control, and that he wants to hurt the way he has been hurt, or he wants to hurt from a place of hurt within himself? Because when we try to process that level of rage and self-hatred, or whatever you want to call it, however you want to frame it in that scenario, we can't wrap our minds around that, because that's not who we are. But what has happened in his life to bring him to that point? So when I look at that scenario, I feel sorrow for him, as well as for her, because what has happened in his life that has put this kind of rage in him, and it makes it easier for me to, out of a place of sorrow for him and understanding that, you know, even if he were a drug addict, as I've heard he was, and if he had been high at the time that he committed that act, when he was arrested and he sat in that jail cell and he came to himself, and I'm using that term now that I'm returning to clarity of mind. I'm not high on any substance. I'm sitting in a cell now, and I'm not saying he was high at the time he did it. I'm just saying if he had been. When you have that opportunity to sit with yourself now and you think back over that act, what can possibly be going through your mind? Do you have regret? Do you ask yourself, how could I have done that? I mean, as I look at that picture, there's so many things that I don't know, but what I do know based on what I've seen, it leads me to a place of being able to forgive him, because I feel sorry for the fact that because you don't understand the divinity that's in you, you don't know who you are, you act from a place of rage where you take another life in such a violent manner. That, for some reason, helps me to be able to forgive him more readily than being angry with him, because I feel sorry for him. I feel sorry that she died in that manner and that it was horrible what he did. But I feel sorry for him that he could even do that. And I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but it helps me to understand if I messed up in the things I've done when I didn't know who I was and I can forgive myself, I can look at you with that same compassion and be more readily, well, it will be easier for me now to forgive you because I understand from that point of view, having looked at my own life, if that makes any sense. And I just wanted to add that.
It does make sense. It does. Because what we have done over the years, we have degrees of levels rather of what we forgive and what we don't forgive, based upon how we feel about it. When we are not given that option in the scriptures at all, there are no caveats to forgiveness. You either do it or you don't, and it's without regard to what the act is. So it does make all the sense in the world. Any questions about that or comments?
There was a time when we made a discussion where we talked about concepts. Like, for example, if you go into politics and you look at some of the things that Trump said and did, you can separate him based on the concept and the system that's out there. Help me tie forgiveness to that, because forgiveness is more looking at the person, right? So I'm not forgiving the concept. I'm forgiving the action or the words that were said, and it just made me think about that. There's a separation there, so it gives you an opportunity to create a clear path. It gives you an opportunity. It gives you an opportunity to free yourself. Really.
You're right.
Am I? Yeah. Help me with that.
You're not forgiving the concept, but you forget where you are. You are not. What you're doing, you're restoring the person, right? Why does that person need restoration? Because that person is also a victim of his environment. That person does not know who it is at all, has no clue of its divinity or its responsibility to life itself. It sees itself as an instrument of death and destruction. When you mentioned Trump in regards to that. That's the same principle. He sees himself as an instrument of death and destruction, but not death. He doesn't see himself as killing anybody, but that's what it amounts to. When we talk about the concept that brought that about, we are in the process of transforming the energy that allows that concept to live, that gives it life. However, if you hold animosity towards the person, then you are giving life to that concept itself, that energy itself. So am I making sense?
Yeah.
And let me give you an example of how evil this is in terms of concepts that look different but are the same. The concept that Kathy described is no different than the concept that you described with Trump, Ron, and is no different than the concept of Joe Biden right now. The reason that there are demonstrations in Cuba is because of the embargo that Trump put in place against Cuba. He stopped any monies from being sent into Cuba from the people who are Cuban who work in this country. He stopped any exchange of Cuban currency for currency in this nation. And he put a stop to everything he could that would ship food to Cuba or the resources necessary for medicine. With the stroke of a pen, Biden could change that. But he has removed everything that Trump did except that. He would rather see people die of hunger and for the lack of medication just to make a point. Why? Because the Cubans in Miami did not vote for him en masse when he ran for office, and he wants those votes for Democrats. So, excuse me, he's willing to trade people's lives for votes. So what's the difference between him and Biden and the man who stumps a woman to death? Is there a difference in any of them? I'm waiting.
No.
No difference. None whatsoever. All of those concepts, all of those actions result in death that could have been prevented. So we cannot afford to have levels of forgiveness or types of acts or types of circumstances that we forgive. We don't have that luxury or that option. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Any other questions, comments, or observations?
Yeah, and also in regards to the act of certain things being done, and asking how do you relate that, or where does forgiveness need to take place in those types of situations? Those are actions or the results of a group of people, the manifestation of a group of people who, in some way, shape, or another, see themselves as being less than themselves. Because whenever you are, or anyone is engaged in anything that is supposedly harmful in any way, and the reason why I say it becomes from a place of of not being whole or not recognizing that wholeness, because there is an attempt to fill oneself with something, um, or to get something that is lacking, or because it does not see the connection of its to that thing that it is trying to destroy or harm. So all of it deals with unwholeness, so to speak. So when these things happen, I say that to say that it is a manifestation of a group of people or individuals who are doing some type of act, and now, of course, not consciously in what it is that we're talking about and describing right now as it relates to wholeness, but not seeing themselves as being whole. So the forgiveness is not to the act, so to speak. It is because we understand that that act was just that, an act, but the forgiveness is given to the thing that drove that act to happen, the underlying thing, which was the lack of wholeness that was there, or the lack of perception or identity with wholeness that was there, or was it there? I hope y'all understand what I'm saying, because I just messed that last little part up. I'm
We
finished.
got it.
Okay.
I understood what you said, and that's kind of what I meant by freeing. I think in a way that the same thing that duped me, being an African, into thinking that I can conform and seeing your way is right. My self forgiveness opens the door for you seeing yourself. In a way, I think it more than just frees me, because we are both caught up, whether you're African or Caucasian, you're caught up in the same concepts.
You're right.
Yeah.
And it
So
does. You're right.
yeah,
What I see is, what happens is now that I'm not playing your game anymore, right? You want to know what happened.
yeah,
And you
What
want to
changed?
gain that control back as well, because this is not good anymore.
Yeah, so now I'm trying to figure out what went wrong. And in doing so, now I realize what happened. I'm presented with an opportunity to be a totally different person coming out of this. You see that?
yeah, yeah. So that's what I mean. It's freeing. I don't know how else to describe it. I guess just freeing is the only term I can think of. It kind of opens doors.
Well, anytime that there is opportunity to change, that is indicative of a door being open, you know?
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question. When we talk about, we see the violence of the man stomping or beating the woman to death, and then if you look at the insurrection, where they trampled over a woman, this man was trying to pull her to safety, but these people, you can look at just like a swarm of people with this rage, with this energy that they had. And then when they come down off in this high, so to speak, they were like, I don't know what got into me. It was just something that, it was a force that was pushing me. We hadn't stopped to think about that this energy that they had, that this negative energy, that it was a rage, it was something that we had never seen before. And I was just thinking about how we can connect to this man, and we need to connect to the insurrection of how that rage and how the energy was put forth.
Typically, when people act in extreme, violent, and destructive ways, it is because they feel powerless, and they are seeking to have some type of control, and it can come out and present itself in, I don't know, better, very crazy ways. But even sometimes the people who are engaged in these certain things don't realize what it is that they are doing. Like they actually view themselves as being weak, not having power, not having control. And of course, I don't want to say it's terrible, but they were willing to go to a very destructive place and not even think when they could or could not have been thinking consciously about what it is that they were willing to do to feel control. But we talk about that guy perhaps who stumped the lady being under the influence of drugs. Well, to be frightened, and I'm not condoning any of this, by the way, but to be frightened um, and to be so thirsty for power and what they think to feel whole or whatever, or to have some type of identity in certain ways is just as strong as being on a drug.
Um, I want to interject something. While we're talking about this, have you not noticed that when multiple people are injured, it's usually not an African who does it? Why?
Pastor Richard, repeat
It's
yourself.
usually what?
Usually when multiple people are injured, what? Because you were
When
multiple.
multiple people are attacked, right, or killed, it's usually not an African who does it. When throngs of people in numbers like was at that building do things, it's not the Africans who do it. Why is that so? Usually, if we are after someone, we get that person, as opposed to going into the building and shooting everybody in the building. Have you noticed that? If you haven't, the FBI have. Because when the guy in D.C. was killing people, they had no clue. You couldn't have made them believe it was an African male doing that. They described it as a white male in his mid-30s. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
So why is that? There has to be some sense of who we are, or some sense of respect for life, for that to happen. For to be able to restrain yourself. Why is it you just don't get in such a rage that you just take care of everybody in there? Why? There has to be something that stops us at that point. But how long would that happen? How long would that hold us if we don't stop everything from doing what it's doing now? How long would it take for us to take on, to embrace that identity to the extent that we do the exact things the exact ways? That's when we are at a place of no return. It is imperative that we employ forgiveness, that we recognize loving kindness that we are in all instances. We cannot allow this to continue to flourish until it begins to draw everyone into that cycle of mass shootings without regard to who's being killed. Mass shooting, mass anything that's harmful to people, mass starvation that's allowing to take place, being allowed to take place in Cuba, mass death because we don't want to send the vaccine to countries of people of color. We have to stop this. And we don't stop it simply by casting a vote. Yes, that's part of the manifestation. But it never will manifest if we don't change the energy. If we had not done what we have done in terms of recognizing the power of feminine energy, there is no way that Stacey Abrams could have done what she did in Georgia. It doesn't matter to me what people think about whether or not we were able to do. I know we did it because it was never done till we did it. This is our history with our desires crying out to our Creator. We have seen the positive results of it. So let us understand now how to amplify these positive results. The amplification of it comes through forgiveness, loving kindness, mercy, without regard to of what's taking place. Any questions about that? No questions? No comment? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let me leave you with this. The mantle that has been placed on us is one that the world has never seen before. This earth has always been a place of chaos. We have the opportunity to bring it to a place of balance, to right wrongs, and to bring this society to a true place of what democracy is supposed to be. We are in the best position that anyone has ever been in to bring into a realization a new heaven and a new earth. So I implore you not only to keep meditating, but I implore you to also focus on what we're being taught, embrace it, incorporate it into your daily living, and let all of us enjoy the manifestation of change for the benefit of humanity. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll see you on Saturday.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Night,
Thank you,
everybody.
Patty.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.